We just do what we want. It's not like we're like...
It kind of made me sad.
We're not going to get numbers because we talked about Max
He
keeping.
seemed like a genuinely nice guy.
He did.
He was a nice guy.
He apparently raised $100 million for charity.
It's good. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
1/10 of $1 billion.
Quite the fundraiser.
In your face, PK Subban.
Yeah, PK Subban.
I love how he's given this huge amount of money to charity, and whenever I see somebody who's done more, I'm like, it's PK. Poor PK.
All right. You guys ready to do this?
Yep.
I know Mike is. Mike, are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to Good, Bad, or Bullshit. 3 guys, random topics, quality reviews. My name's Mike Hodgins, and one of your 3 hosts on this program. With me, as always, is Mr. Crofton Steers. Hello, Crofton.
Hey, Michael.
And, of course, the show would not be complete without Mr. Bo Schwartz.
Why, hello there, Mike. Hello, Crofton. Hello, Good, Bad, or Bullshit listeners.
I always say Mr. when I introduce you guys, and one of us needs to get like a doctorate or something so that we can change it up. Or become a professor. Actually, Bo is teaching a course, well, I think we might have mentioned this, teaching a course on podcasting, so we should call him Professor Bo Schwartz.
Sweet. I'll gladly accept the professor title.
Professor. Like a 3-hour course.
Professor Schwartz. I've taught 3 hours in my lifetime, and I'm now a professor.
And once we break it really big with this podcast, like once we become large-scale internet celebrities, universities are going to fall over backwards to award us honorary doctorates, the most esteemed kind of doctorate.
That's true, and the best way to get those is to pander for them shamelessly on every episode.
Wasn't there this like disgraced senator in Canada who went by the title of doctor, and he had received some honorary doctorate from like a non-accredited Christian university somewhere in the States? It was like
University of Phoenix.
It was like the most pathetic honorary doctorate you can get, and he went by doctor. Like it was like clearly worked not at all to get that. Anyways, I would like that to be me one day.
Yeah, me too.
Dr. Mike Hodgins.
PhD.
PhD honorary University of the Celestial Moons. Has to be some new age.
A University of the Celestial Moons sounds too cool, even if that's an unaccredited degree. It's still a cool sounding degree.
But it's always things like that. Like this. Remember Mike Lynch, this friend of ours, he had become a minister in the Church of
Fire.
What was it?
I think it was Church of Fire or something.
Was it? No, it was more like the Church of the World or something. It sounded. But anyways, you just applied online and you became a minister. Yeah.
One of these days, he's going to be in an emergency situation. Be like, "We need a minister, quick!"
What
he's
type
like,
of
I took
situation
my Hippocratic oath. I'll be held liable if I don't help in this situation, and then bungle it.
It would be the time when someone is dying and they're a spiritual person and they need someone to give them the last rites. And I can think of no one worse to do that than Mike Lynch.
I'm so glad we're besmirching his name
without his consent. That. I think Mike Lynch would give a funny last rites to people.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be funny to the person dying, but anyone else would be like, "Geez, I can't believe he said that to that dying man."
Speaking of people dying, the great Max Keeping has passed away, and a lot of people listening won't know who he is, but we all live in the Ottawa area, and he was a great guy that raised a lot of money for charities, and we did charities on the last episode, so I think we need to give him like a
R.I.P. Max Keeping.
Yeah, it's it's always sad when someone when anyone dies. I think it was cancer as well, but yeah, he did those telethons for years.
He was a fixture on television, like more than just you see a lot of anchors go through the ages. But Max Keeping was like an institution. Like he was a very strong
also had
brand.
Like a 2-foot-long rat tail, which was funny that he was an anchor. Yeah, it was cool.
I never saw that on air.
He had short hair everywhere and then a rat tail in the back.
Yeah, it was like a mullet, except more like he just had the rat tail and it was like braided. It was classy, clean. Max
Oh,
Keeping
man.
was all about like professional in the front. You hit you party on the
Did
back.
He also come out of the closet at one point too. Like that was a big thing for him as
I
well.
think so. I think he may
Yeah,
have.
it was. Yeah.
Like he's part of a fairly conservative news program. It's not really known for being edgy. It's a local kind of deal, but I think him coming out was also, it was big news, and I think everyone just adores the man basically.
I also think he had adopted like something like 12 kids or something ridiculous
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
right. It's funny. It's starting to sound a bit like that Bill Brasky skit on Saturday Night Live. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you've ever seen that, where they're all toasting him in the bar after he died and saying increasingly extravagant things about him that sound more and more
Well,
like
didn't he
lies.
raise $100 million for charities over his life?
Yeah, that's what they said on the radio, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. Max
Yeah.
Keeping,
The
God, it
Max
makes me
Keeping.
to
The Max Keeping.
Though as much as he'll be missed, he is making me feel worse about myself. I'm like, I've done nothing with my life. Max Keeping did a lot with his. Well, at least some people can.
Hey, you're raising a kid and providing homes for people.
Barely.
The Max Keeping.
The Max Keeping.
Max Keeping. There'll never be another one like him. It's true.
It's true.
He was
All right.
one of a kind. Well,
We should-
speaking of there not being anything like it, aka one of a kind, we have the one of a kind random topic generator that the one of a kind Mike Hodgins is going to make work.
Yeah,
Operate.
let's do it.
Yank on.
Yeah, there you go. I was trying to find something nasty to say about what he does.
Apologies to our listeners, but I got this chest cold today, so I sound like Hodgins does right now all the time.
The topic today is hierarchy.
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 So we're talking about like the structure of humans basically, and how power is assigned to people within that structure.
I mean, I don't know if it's a structure of human.
Structure of human structure of human relationships.
Why is it that? It could be an ant, all the ants reporting to the queen ant in the anthill.
Yeah, but I don't see even that. I don't think that's.
Okay, structure of relationships. Period.
I don't. No, I don't think it's that either. Like
An
I think
intangible structure of
Well, no, I
relationships.
think hierarchy is not intangible. It's usually specific and constructed. I mean, I guess there's informal hierarchies, but I think at least when I think of hierarchies, I think first and foremost of the military, where they have, which I think is, I think where and bureaucracies are also structured in hierarchical manners, as are most corporations, but I think they're all kind of based on the military. So I think I don't think human structures of relationships are naturally hierarchical. I think people who strive for power like them to be so, but I don't think that's a natural thing necessarily. Maybe it is. I'm no anthropologist, but I would say certainly in the military, you could make the argument why hierarchies are a good thing.
But we still haven't really said what hierarchies are.
Well,
We just
okay,
pointed to an example of.
It's like a big pyramid, right? Where you have let's say it's the military. Okay, you're like, the chief, supreme chief of the armed forces, and you're like general 5-star or whatever. And then the leaders of the Navy, Air Force, and the Army all report to you, but you're the head chief. And then all of those people are in control of their each. So if you're the, admiral of the Navy, the grand admiral or whatever, then you're the boss of the whole Navy, and you have a bunch of sub admirals, and it's like a big pyramid that
or it's a structure of relationships where power is assigned at different levels.
Word. It's a power structure.
I would point out
that's
at
a
this point
relationship.
that Mike's never been in the military.
If someone
Nor does he know
if
any of
someone
them.
has power over you, they have a relationship with you, and it's defined by the dynamics that govern it, the rules.
Right, okay, but let's not conflate things. There are power dynamics and there are relationships which have power dynamics, but those are not necessarily hierarchies. Like hierarchies, like you have a boss, right? And your boss, like say you work someplace, your boss is in charge of your team, but your boss probably reports to a higher up boss who is the boss of those level of bosses. That's a hierarchy, like a structure of management and a structure of command, I think, is mostly what it is. Because if you talk about human relationships, if hierarchies do exist there, they're certainly informal.
I think the relationships are two ways. Like, I think it's easy to point at the
No, but
boss and be like, the boss has the
in
power.
hierarchies.
What? Well, yes, because they're in a hierarchy. What the bottom is doing does have an impact on what the higher echelons of a hierarchy have, right? Like, they're not. It doesn't just go one way.
It mostly does.
I don't think
I mean,
so.
I guess to some extent it goes up, but mostly, like, again, coming back to a military thing, if the sergeant says to the platoon or whatever, I like how I don't know anything about the military. I order you all to go over the top and attack the enemy. Then I'll be like, well, we've discussed this, and we unanimously think, Sergeant, that you should go over the top, and we'll stay here in the trench. It doesn't work that way.
No, but they might. It's called mutiny, but,
yeah, but
you have to manage that,
you know,
right? You have
like,
to.
the point. Why are you trying? Like, you're arguing so
Guys,
much.
just before you guys are both arguing here, I don't like doing this, but I went online to try and get this sorted out so we can at least move forward. So, definition of hierarchy is a system or organization in which people or groups are ranked one above the other according to status or authority. And they give examples like the clergy, the Catholic Church, and they give examples like the army and such. And the word seems to stem from Greek. Surprise, surprise.
Really? I would have bet Latin. Damn it! It's always one or the other.
Medieval Latin at one point, but in interesting, there's like this use over time for the word hierarchy, and it's used way more often, like in the late 20th century, early 21st century than it has been any time before. So it's like it's a word that at one point in a term that probably people latched onto, but maybe we didn't even. When talking about the military and talking about these organizations, we probably didn't use the term hierarchy until recently.
We might not use the term, but I bet you that is related to the fact that it was something that most human beings weren't exposed to greatly. And I think that I bet you like as the Industrial Revolution ramped up and went forward, people were way more exposed to hierarchies than they probably otherwise were in their day-to-day lives. Like if you're an agrarian person, who farms and whatnot, it's not. I don't think that it would have been a highly hierarchical structure that you worked in farm. Like, you had work to do. Maybe your father told you what to do or whatever, but it wasn't a structured hierarchy. But these days, most of us have some interaction with some form of a hierarchical structure. Like I do at my work, it's very hierarchical.
So there's hierarchies that are kind of like that are established through perhaps training or competencies. I think of the military, where generally you go through certain drills or certain performance measurements, you get promoted, and that's how the hierarchy is formed. Except for maybe the highest levels, which are appointed by executive governmental authority. Then you've got. So that's competencies. In the case of the church, I think it ends up being similar, because now they would say it's chosen by a higher power, but I think what's most likely is that they have their own inner set of competencies, and you get promoted. You become a cardinal, et cetera, to eventually to be raised to pope or whatever, the top of the hierarchical pyramid. But what about, like, is it possible to have a hierarchy where you are essentially choosing the people that are to be above you? Like, if I'm electing a member of parliament or a prime minister, or in the States, the president and all that sort of stuff, in a way they're electing the people below are electing the top of the pyramid. Are there pyramids that are totally made up of, like, done communally? Said, hey, he'd be a good guy to be the boss or whatever.
Here's an example for you. At a previous job that I held, the entire organization was sent a questionnaire to fill out to do the performance review for the company chief executive. It's called a 360 review. and that gets sent to the board of directors and is a primary source of information to review that person at the top of the hierarchy. So this person can't go around being mean and then put it on a good show for the people he answers to. He actually has to walk the walk, because that stuff will most definitely come out in what's reported. That information is anonymously sent. So that's an example. I think the power, the power dynamic is still very much intact, but certainly the relationship is one of the people underneath can affect what happens at the top.
Well, and I think maybe an even clearer example of that are co-ops, which have still some form of, like, if you work in a co-op business or something like that is structured like a co-op, there are still people who do the management stuff and things like that. But I think that ultimately everyone holds equal weight of choice and stuff like that. So you can, like they're democratic in the roles, but I think that but I mean, they still have some structures of hierarchies. And I think this comes back to the question, probably one of the ultimate questions of this topic, like, well, why do we have hierarchies? And I mean, I think simply taking first crack at it, that it's like there's some efficiencies to having structures like these. Like, I mean,
right.
If you go back to the military unit example, it's just that there's one person there that has to make the final call on decisions. So for a group that has to operate under pressure and make quick decisions, there's no time for vetoing. There's no time for, I don't know about this idea. That one person gets information reported to it, has to make a decision. You just do the thing. And their success is dependent on respect of that hierarchy. When the sergeant says, go into that barn and attack whatever's in there, you two flank, the rest of you through the front door, you have to follow it unquestioningly, because sitting around will alert the enemy or whatever. So it's
right,
almost...
but that's almost more like direct following orders. Like, whereas a hierarchy, I'm probably wrong about this, but I thought I heard that Genghis Khan had structured his military in I think it was all about kind of like tens. So like to each 10, there'd be like a group of 10, which would be the bottom, and then they'd have one sort of leader, and then those leaders, 10 of them would report to. They'd be grouped under a broader thing, would report to one. And you can see how that's efficient in a military. So if you're Genghis Khan and you're like, okay, I have an army of 100,000 people and I want to make sure we kill 1 million people in this city we're sacking. And then he, to send out the orders to 100,000 of his, men would be ridiculous, obviously. But if he has 10 people approach him, his generals or whatever, and says, okay, I want this to happen. And then they can go to each their 10, and that message gets transmitted much more effectively than if he tried to just yell it out to everyone, obviously.
It's funny because that resonates with me a little bit. Have you guys ever seen Survivor, the TV show Survivor?
A long time ago. Haven't partaken in a while.
I used to watch it all the time, and like you would start to see, like, it's been on for a long time, you'd start to see trends, right? Like things that came back. And one of the things is like at the beginning of the game, they're formed into two tribes, which are essentially two groups of strangers of like, we're talking 10 plus people, right? So like double digits people. And what's interesting is that they're all given tasks, like they essentially have to build shelter, all that sort of stuff. But everybody, as soon as you're at that amount of people, everybody looks for some sort of direction and leadership, because if they all run off and individually do their tasks, things start to break down or get confusing. So someone steps up, generally as leader or whatever. But as the show whittles down and people get eliminated, often the leaders are the first to go. But as soon as you get under 10 people, the lower and lower you get, the less there is a need for leadership. And when you're down to 3 or 4 people just, take initiative for themselves. But the larger the group, the more likely there's going to be a desire for some sort of cohesiveness. And the only way that works in the end is if there is a leader, somebody on top of the pyramid. As we did an episode on democracy, so it's very possible that leader could be assigned through a democratic process. But for certain purposes, and the military is definitely one, it makes sense often to have a very fixed hierarchy with set roles to keep things moving as cohesively as possible. And I think that that's a huge positive of the hierarchical structure. I'm not, and as I said in the democracy episode, I'm not necessarily sure I'd want to take that military structure and apply it to my democratic process, my electing of officials and all that sort of thing. When I go see my city councilor, for instance, I don't expect that he's going to tell me what to do. He's going to listen to my concerns and represent them on the municipal, on the municipal level. Same with my parliamentary representative and stuff like that. So I hierarchy, in the Government of Canada process, if you made sort of like a pyramid of who's at the top, you'd have the prime minister, ministers below, and all this sort of thing. But it's a democratically elected hierarchy.
Well, it is, but only the top two tiers basically are elected. And see, and it is interesting to think about government or bureaucracies, which tend to be hierarchical, as a good counterpoint to military. I think when you talk about the military, it's pretty clear why hierarchy makes a hell of a lot of sense. Like, you need people to perform certain tasks, not really be questioning them, and it's an efficient way to organize a system like the military. It makes total sense. Now, and we take it as such a given that bureaucracies or big organizations should also be hierarchical, but I feel like there's clear problems with that, and it's because their functions are different. Like, if your function is like you need to get troops on the ground to go battle, it's like, ultimately you're the biggest force you have is on the bottom. You need to get them out there, and it's all about getting them information, and that comes down through the hierarchy. But say a government or a bureaucracy like a public service operates almost like in an inverse way. So what they're doing is producing work of some kind, policy stuff, program stuff. And then so this stuff is not coming down from the top, like broad direction is saying we need to do this or whatever. But then people produce all this stuff, and it needs to go up through the hierarchy and get approved and get buy-in or whatever. And then so you increasingly get all of these people who are managers, middle managers, senior managers, whatever, increasingly bottlenecked with stuff, so that when you're on the bottom, they're inherently inefficient in the sense that we talked about bureaucracy a lot. We did another episode on this, but I feel like, again, it comes down to like it's too hierarchical, because you do some work, you submit it to your manager, but your manager, might be having to review work from 10 different people, and then that has to get submitted up through to their manager, and that person's reviewing stuff from like maybe 100 people. All of a sudden it becomes the point where they have to hire all these advisors to help them deal with the stuff. It's just inefficient. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know that I have a better solution than a hierarchy to organize something like a public service, but there certainly are corporate organizations which are experimenting with non-hierarchical systems, very linear distribution of power, and I mean, they're very different. I don't know that they're all successes, but they certainly do exist.
And I think capitalism encourages the like somebody has to answer for the bottom line of the company at the end of the day. I think one issue with hierarchy, hierarchies in general, is that while I mentioned earlier about the army, for example, being one based on competencies, what happens, and this happened, and Mike gave the example of the government, and I can think of other type of situations where the person that's on top of the other people is not necessarily the most competent person.
Well, that gets to... Oh, sorry, you're not finished.
No. But it is a question. You can expand on it if you want. I'm just like, you get these situations where you get like, the idea is you're trying to promote. Okay, to make a most effective pyramid, you've got to promote to the next, connectors, the next height levels, the people that are most competent, best suited for those tasks. And that's going to happen a lot of the time. But sometimes it's not going to happen. You're going to promote some dum-dum, and meanwhile, underneath, you're going to have a ton of competent people that are going to get frustrated and maybe lose direction, right?
Well, the reality of promoting people, stepping people up to various levels of power is that, when you were painting the picture earlier about competencies, it's like, yes, that's part of the game of hierarchy and the game of a lot of our structures, But in reality, hierarchies are highly corruptible. We all have personal biases. We have people that we like over other people. So if I was in a position to pick somebody to put into power from a lesser group, yes, I'd look at competencies, but I'd look for someone I trust. And someone I trust, maybe that's along racial lines or gender lines. Even if I'm not aware even on some subconscious level because of my biases, I'm making decisions that lean me in towards that favor. Also, there's just outright corruption, where people just, oh, I can get you promoted because I like you, and you validate me when we talk and make me feel better, rather than that irritating person who's more highly qualified for it. But they're irritating, so they're not a team player or whatever, like all that bullshit that goes along with that is part of hierarchy. And so I think that like we can look at like an idyllic hierarchy, like in the military, we romanticize it, where it's like, even I did, which is like, we need to be an effective unit, so you need to, follow my orders unquestioningly. Maybe in certain like emergency responder and military situations that makes sense, but as you get more and more into the philosophical side of leadership and move away from the need for that instantaneous command and obey, hierarchies are very troublesome for humans. And I think there's an implicit cultural signifier that we put on people higher in the hierarchy that are more, people higher up are more celebrated in media and by the people. We tend to think of them as having more value in society and as people than the people on the bottom who are not noteworthy.
It's a good point.
There's a lot of problems with hierarchy.
There's certainly like that's the thing with hierarchy. There is implicit power with as you move up a hierarchy, and with and power and or status, and so a lot of people. So it always strikes me as people who crave that kind of thing will look to move up hierarchies. Like if you're someone who is like, I like being the boss of people, and that's what I want in my life, to be the boss of people, more people. You might want to move up, and probably you're smart enough to not be, an asshole. Like, I mean, somehow Donald Trump did it, but I mean, most people who are like that are charismatic enough to not have people outwardly dislike them. In the like example Bo mentioned earlier, where you might be reviewed by your underlings. You're charismatic, but ultimately you're someone who craves power. Like, if you don't crave power, like if you don't want to have, people under, you're probably not really going to go for those types of positions. But the people who do, and I feel like there's always some inherent bad things about that. Like, because if that's what they crave, power, and that's what they're after, then you're always like, are they doing it for the right reasons? And I mean, I guess some people are selfless about it, but
yeah, no, I just wanted to also bring up, because we're talking about this, I mentioned the 360 review, where it's like, oh yeah, people just give, review of your boss. Well, the reality of that situation is also, I want to keep my job. He hasn't done anything egregious, so I'm not going to be completely truthful. I'm just going to write the PC thing and be like, yeah, he's a great guy and he was pretty nice, whatever, because I want to get promoted, or I don't want to draw any negative attention, because that's why whistleblowers are a thing. Whistleblowers are a thing because the normal chain of command is not working. Like, people have to return to the media. Snowden has to go and, reveal to the world the secret information, because communicating it internally is not an option because of hierarchy. And so I think that that's what I want to say. I'm sorry, Mike, for interrupting you.
It makes a good point. You've made some good points about this. I think that one thing that's a little annoying about reviewing something like hierarchy is and when we put topics into the random generator in that giant bag that we use, often we try to pick up ones like breathing air or eating food, stuff that is really just absolutely something that we need to do to survive.
Breathing air is bullshit.
Hierarchy is one of these troubling ones where, like, I gave the example that Survivor TV show, but that is sort of the whole point of that show, is to be like, okay, we're replicating what it's like to be abandoned on some island. If you took all of humanity and you just wiped it out tomorrow, and society had to rebuild itself from the ground up. They knew nothing about previous societies, whatever. Like they just found food and did their own thing, and they grew into something completely different. I have to think like, and maybe this is just everything I've seen corrupting my thoughts here, that hierarchies will just naturally occur, that people will look to, there always will be people looking to follow leaders. Those leaders will then follow other leaders, and then duk, 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 you have your pyramid. Like it's just always going to happen. So in one sense, it's like railing against it is cathartic because you're like, oh man, there's so many imperfections in the hierarchical system. But on the other hand, what's kind of frustrating is it just seems like it will always happen. That's how humans are hardwired.
Right. So can we escape hierarchy? Like, is it even possible to escape the idea of organizing ourselves in a way that where someone isn't a leader?
I think you're swimming against the current when that like Mike mentioned that the company that's trying to do things more on a lateral basis, and that's because as humans we've reached that level where we're really informed. It's possible to look at all sorts of behavioral studies, see how things are done, and try to strive to go in different directions. But if you're starting at the very beginning, like I mentioned earlier, if you're hitting the reset button on humanity, I feel like we are going to cling to that hierarchy. We're going to by default sort of form these ones wherever we are throughout the world. Like regional little hierarchies will build up, and that's how nations were formed. And anyway, it's frustrating.
Well, but see, I don't know that that's actually true. I think well, okay, I shouldn't say it's not. I don't think it's true.
All right, I'm putting a stop to the recording right now.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still getting giant lag.
Yeah, we lost you there again, so let's take a cut. It's all good. How are you doing right now?
You guys are making interesting points and stuff I want to jump in on. Can we restart this call? It's super laggy.
Yeah, let me get rid of you. All right.
I'm having no problems with you.
Yeah, we're good. It's just it's on his end, so let's try reconnecting him. Incidentally, tomorrow when the show goes up, I want you to have a look at our video because our video looks pretty. I changed it around a bit. The overlay. I'd like your feedback on it.
Sweet. You're talking GBB?
Yeah. And if you like it, it might be something I do with EXM too. It's not a big deal, but it's just a little different.
I was going to make a joke. I'm like, did you make it like Scott Johnson's podcast, which have a clear hierarchy of him is like big giant screen, I'm the boss, and his three like minions to the side? That's a funny hierarchy.
Yeah, that's true.
You all eat my dick.
Dude. Don't be like that.
It's a joke. Whatever. He seems like he's got a sense of humor.
He does. We should have him on. I think it'd be a lot of fun. And now that we do core, I'm sure he would say yes.
Sure. Would always be good to have a guest. Okay, it seems better now. You guys were talking all about. Croft was talking about like the reset of humanity. Now that was an interesting point. I had some.
Yes.
Okay, so if you could collect your thoughts, the recording's turned off right now, so I'll start up the recording and you can just go when you're ready.
Okay.
Does that seem acceptable? All right. I just need. Crofton's camera went a little wonky because of everything. Not your fault, Crofton. He's muted. He can't talk back to me, sucker. All right, you ready to go, Mike?
Yeah. So it's an interesting point, this reset of this like reset of humanity, and we just get back into the hierarchies again. And I think like what this all comes down to, you almost getting at the kind of root of why we have these, is because I think that there are examples where that has kind of happened, and I think those examples exist in the Americas after Mr. Columbus came and was like, "Hello, native people." That was a joke of him breathing his horrible germs onto the native people of this land, and then something of like, well, yeah, it's true, because he's like, enjoy my smallpox and various other diseases.
It's just such a detour to take a slam on somebody's
Clumps?
yeah.
Yeah, he like. There's no question that the coming of Europeans to the Americas
Oh
killed
no, I know.
tens of millions of people. They said the number is something like 75 to 90 million people died.
All right, where are you going with this?
Okay, well that is it. So that's you just talked about what would happen if society, everyone was died and it got rebuilt. That's a perfect example. So I read this interesting book by this guy named Ronald Wright called "What Is America," and it kind of traces that a little bit. And he says that before Columbus arrives, there was giant civilizations here with kings, rulers, hierarchies. But that after so many of these people died, what emerged were very different societies. And oftentimes, people will look to First Nations as kind of having different structures than the ones Europeans are used to, which are largely hierarchical, of more democratic, more well, I guess democratic is
More
a
like
good word.
communal or
One.
cooperative.
Yeah, equitable, equality,
equitable,
some word
equitable,
like that.
equitable.
I mean, and an example being that apparently, like economic structure for some of the Iroquois, apparently, where like surplus stuff was kept in longhouses and it was kind of doled out to whoever needed it by the matriarchs of maybe they were just the bosses, but like that was one thing they did. Things were more horizontal. Like there was some structure, but not like these huge and everyone had more of a say. And so I guess the point I'm coming at is that our hierarchy is a component of humanity. And I would say when there are huge clumps of human beings together, then yes, they just naturally are going to form. And I don't know how else you'd organize massive amounts of people. But I think, and again, like the Survivor example, when you're down to just a few, and I think if these are small communities too, like if you're in a small village, there's less of a need for these kinds of hierarchies of structure because people get along more or less, like we have human relations. Like when I was criticizing Bo, and I don't mean him specifically, about like our relationships the same as hierarchy, and I would be like, no, they're not. I think that hierarchies exist where relationships can't. So in the military, you can't have a relationship with the general, so it comes through a chain of command, whatever. But mostly human beings are good at relating to each other when they know they know the person or what's at stake. And I've heard numbers that generally like people are good at like something like 50 people. Like if you have a network of kind of 50 people and you do all your stuff through them, there's no need for the kind of structures. Our natural social ways of relating to each other just work. But once you have millions, thousands of people, how do you organize that? And then those things fall apart. And I think that's where hierarchies then come into place. But they have those problems.
So I have a question that train of thought, because that's very interesting. I think that's some very interesting thinking. It's do you humans can survive? We're creatures. We've evolved based on the pressures, the outside pressures that have caused us to evolve this way. So there are definitely environments that are inhospitable to us. Maybe not on this planet, but going to live in the Arctic, we probably would die off without our inventions. So do you think that also that humans, like when we're organizing ourselves in these hierarchies involving thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, like is that inhospitable to us in a way that we don't see because of its impersonal nature? Like we're coping with it, but it seems like it really blows for everyone involved except 2%.
Yeah, like that's the thing I heard about, and it was I think if it wasn't that same author Ronald Wright, or he referenced this essay someone had written. I'm going to do a horrible job because I can't remember the title exactly of the essay or who said it. But
some essay by some guy. You heard it here first.
The title, and I found it one time, and it was this very academic-y essay. I found it one time on the internet, but I've had trouble finding it since. And it was called something
academic-y essay.
Maybe I'll try to find it, and I can post it on our Twitter feed or something. But the concept was called it was something like the worst mistake humanity ever made, and it was this idea. Not quite like hierarchies, but so to say that, and things that came along along with hierarchies, we're concentrations of power, right? And to say that once we human beings moved from hunter gatherers to an agrarian lifestyle, that changed things forever. So because basically in hunter gatherer society, you have small groups of people who can get along, um, cooperate with each other to hunt successfully, gather what they need successfully, and apparently the thing is when you had someone being a big asshole trying to boss everyone around, other people just left because that's what you could do, right? Because you made your living off stuff you could hunt. You didn't need to say yes boss to anyone. So people would say this guy's a big jerk or this lady's being an asshole, like we're out of here. And that's how things would work. But once you started having agriculture, and then someone's like, "Hey, I got more grain than you, because I had a better season." So, and they're like, "Oh, I'm starving. Can I have some grain?" They're like, "Yeah, okay, but you owe me some of your grain next year." Then there's okay, sure. And then people start to amass a lot of stuff, and with that comes power. And then once you have powers, you have different hierarchies starting to evolve.
Now you're gonna marry my daughter, or your whole family starves, and I'm gonna take your land through family ownership, or whatever.
But it is interesting in the sense that but also something like an agrarian lifestyle led to the explosion of civilization, right? Like we wouldn't have civilization without that kind of stuff. And I mean, again, like I would agree. Like I don't know how you organize people.
And I would disagree with the First Nations example and stuff like that, where they had their own hierarchies. It's about like they had elders, they had chiefs, counselors in modern times. Like I mean, what happens is soon as you have a group, I think what's coming back here, as soon as you have a group of more than X amount of people, you are probably going to need some way of structuring that group. And with that structure pretty much comes some form of hierarchy. It's very rare that you can restructure giant organizations, giant groups of people, cities, states, anything really without resorting to some sort of form of hierarchy. And that's I think what I was trying to say earlier. Like you burn it all down, and maybe it won't happen immediately, but it's going to happen that these hierarchies are going to reform themselves. This is just the way that humanity is eventually going to rebuild itself.
So, it's true, but I feel like it's kind of like it's because if you look at like again how long civilization has been around and how long, and like because I would totally agree and that when you have too many people, and it's probably not even that big a number when you start getting hierarchies forming, then you're gonna have that stuff forming. But it's just like, is it good? And I would come back to the fact that like if you look at like human evolution and how long there have been humans around, and it's like a couple million years, but how long has there been civilization around? And it's like, yeah, a couple 10,000 years, sort of, maybe 30,000 in some areas, like much shorter time frame. And have we evolved to be able, like, because a lot of people I don't like hierarchies. I mean, I guess I'm getting towards hinting at what my verdict might be. I don't like hierarchies. A lot of people don't like hierarchies because I think probably we spent a couple million years evolving in very small groups where you could generally get along with sort of the social interactions that just work human to human. But then as there's so many more of us, it's hierarchies then evolved. But I just think like it's a much shorter time frame that we've been living with them than has like the history of our species.
So, and just to add on to that, we did an episode of Good, Bad, or Bullshit on the subject of anarchy, which is another kind of archy. I'm sure it's Greek as well, and the archy means like the same thing from the Greek, I'm guessing. But, so, because Crofton was saying, well, the Native Americans had some structure, and I'm sure he's correct. He's, subject matter somewhat expert, I think. But, what about going towards anarchy, which is to me sounds like a refutation of systems of control, which would imply no hierarchy.
I think it's very non-hierarchical. It's yes.
Yeah. So do you think that's because what Crofton was saying was just like we're going to inevitably, and we've all kind of said it too, we're going to inevitably structure ourselves in some way. We can't help it. Is the anarchy dream impossible, or because people believe in anarchy?
Well, a lot of people do feel like, and there's like, and a lot of people say it comes back to like, if we were just to rely on our actual human interactions and personal responsibility that it would work. But I think the problem, and it comes back to so many things that we end up touching on in this show, is that there's probably assholes who ruin it for everyone. So it's like, it's nice to be like, yeah, we have a non-hierarchical world, that's great, but you're always going to have someone like Donald Trump who exists, who's like, I'm the boss, you listen to me. And then some people who I guess are aren't, don't want to stand up to that kind of person, just say whatever, it's just easier to listen to them. And then maybe that's how like hierarchies just form, because some people want power, some people don't care to stand up to power, whatever.
Well, it's often said that power is not created by the powerful; it's perpetuated by the powerless, like who prop the structure up, right?
Well,
like,
yeah, certainly. I mean,
it's like a mass, not hallucination, but it's like, we all sort of we support it by believing in it. If we didn't believe in it, maybe it would cease to exist.
It's funny how we also did monarchy, which
yes,
did we do aristocracy?
Monarchy.
But that's like another specific.
If I recall correctly, I said it was good. Thank you, Queen of England, for She likes to hang out at my house.
It'd be so funny if the Queen went to Beau's house. I'd laugh. I would make my day.
Are we ready to roll into verdicts here?
Right. Okay. I was just gonna get into dukes and barons and stuff. But
we totally skipped out on the feudal system. By the way, big miss, but we were out of time. Also, classic hierarchical trope. You get beheaded and stuff.
You got your verdicts, Beau. Normally, you should save half your.
All right,
stuff for your verdict.
All right, Queen. If you could just excuse me a second, I'm gonna bring in the farm animals. Let's do this. No, I'll be with you in a second, Queen. I don't remember your name. I just call you Queen all the time.
Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah, Elizabeth. See, I knew it. I didn't have to have anyone remind me.
Longest
Hello.
search.
No, put that sex toy down. Sorry. What? Oh, we're on the air. All right. Verdicts. Let me go first. Hierarchies. What are they? I still kind of don't know, but I have a very strong sense of what they kind of are. I think that I like the idea of questioning the fact that we naturally have a propensity to fall into hierarchies. Once we get to a certain amount of people, there are definitely power dynamics between people, even in small groups, that sort of are naturally occurring. So I'm undecided whether or not hierarchies on a broad scale are naturally occurring or put into place by people who don't have a better solution, who are seeking power, like alphas who look to be leadership versus people who are very passive and thus easy to control by them. I also kind of like anarchy. I believe I said anarchy was a good thing, and it's definitely something we should try, because I don't believe that a small percentage of the people should have the rest of the world be subservient to them, even in ways in which the language we use to disguise what those relationships are in our democratic and symbol-filled world that we live in today. So I'm going to say that hierarchy is... it's bullshit. And I say bullshit because I could come back and revise it to say bad. I feel like I don't have enough belief in that it's bad to give it a bad verdict.
Oh, a rare bullshit verdict from Professor Beau Schwartz.
Thank you. Homework due in a week.
Breaking his streak of 6 goods.
Yeah. Man, screw hierarchy.
All right, I guess I'll go next now that I'm speaking. Hierarchy. It's one of those things where it's like you talk about it and you talk about organizing masses of people, and you have to have some kind of hierarchy. But the interesting bit is that most of society, like if you look at society, and we talked about democracy a bit, a lot of it is not that hierarchical. It becomes hierarchical when someone tries to like specifically structure it, like you have a corporation and you have some specific aim, or you run a military and you have a specific aim. It's anytime you have like some specific goal you want to achieve, then it seems like maybe it's an efficient way of organizing people to meet that end. I don't think it's a natural way really for human beings to operate, for reasons discussed in the podcast. I don't think we're, it's either you want to dominate someone or you'd want to be dominated, but like I don't think it's natural. I think most people like to have their voice heard to some extent and things to just not be so rigidly structured. Just because, and I think I've used this kind of line of reasoning before, just because something better doesn't exist doesn't mean that they're good. And and I would go further than that and say that hierarchies are, I think, bad. And just to come back to just because I can't think of something that's a better way to structure, 1,000 people towards a common goal, just because I can't think of a better way to do it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I do know that there are some, new startup kind of companies that are experimenting with totally non-hierarchical structures. I think there's this famous online shoe company, Zappos or something. It's all non-hierarchical. Anyways, I think people are looking for new solutions because hierarchies have so many inherent flaws. People don't like them. They can be really bad. Good for the military, whatever. I don't like the military anyways. There you go. Bad hierarchies.
We'll solve it all with the hive mind. Crofton,
And I'm becoming an anarchist, as I was pointed out. So there you go.
Well, going back to Anarchy, which was like episode 14 of this show way back in our nascent youth or whatever, I took a look back through the chart just to see what we said back then and also to avoid being a hypocrite. Both of you guys said Anarchy was good. I said that it was bullshit, which I stand by. And I understand what Mike's saying. We fundamentally disagree on whether we think it's natural. Like if you look at, for me, hierarchy I see as a natural occurrence amongst not just humans, but like if you look at like say a group of lions, there's always a dominant lion. And
the asshole lion.
The society. I'm just doing my verdict. The society revolves around that line. It's the same with a lot of different animal groups, and I think humans are the same. I think forming hierarchies, especially once our numbers grow and we form large groups, is just a natural part of humanity. So I disagree with Mike there, and I disagree with the idea of like having to find another fighting against your nature to find a better process. I think that that's possible, and I think that we can totally find better ways of organizing ourselves. And honestly, I don't necessarily like being part of a hierarchy, especially when you're not at the top. I don't think anybody would say that, unless they're at the top of a hierarchy, say that they like, oh, I love being a middle guy or a bottom rung or whatever. Nobody likes that stuff. They work sometimes in certain situations. They're sort of a natural occurrence, but a lot of the time they're really annoying to both be a part of, and sometimes the consequences. And Bo was talking earlier about like how choices are made for the people that filled the different rungs inside of a hierarchy, and how sometimes it's just ridiculous. So for all those reasons, I really feel like it's fairly messy, but it's something that we're never going to get away from. And so for me, I see it as a big pile of bullshit.
Well, of course, we're never going to get away from it with that attitude, Crofton.
Bo, if you'd said good, we would have had a full spread, and you could have extended your streak to 7.
Bo's incapable of seeing hierarchies good.
Yeah, I think
he was a manager.
And I say it as someone who, of the three of us, has been a part of a commanding role and in a hierarchical structure. I said commanding role. It sounds like I'm actor talking.
A middle role.
Well, it's a middle role, but I had people that I would order to do things. I had
underlings.
That it's an un-PC way of referring to your employees, but sure. And I had people I reported up to who depended on me, who I might have looked to for further promotion with my reputation. Like being part of that game is very much I don't know. It's why I'm not working right now, although I'm starving. So I'll be back in it. I think I'd prefer to be on the bottom because that whole freedom of like being able to walk away from a thing when it sucks is really important.
You heard it here first, folks. Bo prefers to be on the bottom.
Right. And if we have a Patreon, and if all you listeners would, help support us, or, at some point, maybe, I could do this professionally and not have
He's
to go into
asking
work.
for you to support him.
Hey, we do this show no matter what, and you don't have to feel
That's
bad
true.
about listening to it for free. That's how the product's offered. But
Yes,
I'm
please
allowed
keep
to have
us in
career
touch.
goals, and my career goal is not to be some commander in the middle of some hierarchy in some building somewhere that no one gives a rat's ass about.
That's what I like about it. Like Crofton was like, yeah, it's like the bees reporting to the queen. Like, yeah, we know what those are called? Drones. They're drones. Like, you happy being a fucking drone?
Yeah, they deliver
Maybe
things for
one day I'll
Amazon.
become one of the soldier ants.
You're just reinforcing my natural occurrence theory.
It's wrong though. Humans work by cooperation. Anyways,
Don't believe the
whatever.
hype.
We might all be wrong on this, and
Except
dear
me, I'm
listeners, Crofton's often wrong too. Yes, you should tell us why we're wrong, or why we're right, or why you just have a different opinion than us. We would love to hear from you.
Yes.
And you can send us an email, goodbadbull@gmail.com, and we would read it on the air gladly. And there's no approvals. We're non-hierarchical here. You just send it, and one of us will read it. You can send us a tweet, anything you might want to add to this conversation @goodbadbull, or you can write something on our Facebook page, and please like us there if you feel like doing that. You can find all this information on our website, goodbadbull.com, where you can find links to Stitcher and iTunes, where you can subscribe to this podcast, which hopefully you do or choose to do.
Yeah, that'd be great if you did that.
Yeah, we would appreciate
subscribe to us. Even if you watch us on the website, or if you watch us on YouTube, like throw us a subscribe on your iPhone or whatever.
Yeah,
Stitcher.
whatever, or don't.
But you don't have to. We're just saying, it's a thing you could do.
They're sounding like desperate. You're sounding like Jack Lemmon on Glenn Glary, Glenn
There's
Ross.
no hierarchy here. I can't be like, Mike, stop saying that. You should be saying this, and Mike can't say that to me either, because this is anarchy.
Well,
Yeah.
Gil's gotta eat.
If any of our listeners want to follow you guys independently, independent chaos seeking Bo, where can our listeners find you?
Follow me on Twitter @Bo Schwartz to get all the latest on the Bo Schwartz news.
And drone number 35085B, worker at Crofton, where can our listeners follow you?
They can follow me on Twitter @Crofton Sears. If they use the hashtag Team Crofton, then I will allow them to join my army. The first people to do it will be placed at the top, and then subsequent uses of the hashtag will be lower on the list. So be sure to get your hashtag in early, folks.
That's how it works.
If you use hashtag Team Bo, I'll send you a response saying that's rad, and let you do whatever else you want.
Hashtag Team Crofton.
Team Bo.
I don't have a hashtag because I don't believe in this hierarchical bullshit. Join me in
can't
my
have a
utopian
hashtag.
anarchist paradise in the woods. Okay, whatever.
Well, where can they
Hashtag
follow
Team
you, though?
Crofton.
You have an
Me? Oh yeah, at ML Hodgins. You can follow my tweets.
Don't hashtag Team Hodgins, because you'll get nothing out of it.
Yeah, don't do that. Why would you? It's stupid. Make your own decisions, people.
Hashtag Team Cranky Grandpa.
Cranky grandpa. That's my dad. We call him, my son, I call him Grumpa, because he's grumpy. So like my little kid will be like, oh, here's Grumpa. But I think he kind of likes it, or hasn't picked up on the fact that we're kind of calling him Grumpy all the time.
That's hilarious.
It's funny.
Well, he certainly took to being called Mr. H by me.
He likes being called Mr. H.
That was all due to the fact that a lot of your friends and family members knew them from high school, like knew your mom from high school in particular because she worked there, and we were used to calling her Mrs. Hodgins, where normally I call my friends' moms by their first name, but everybody was calling your mom Mrs. Hodgins, and I was like, I don't know what to do here. She's not Mrs. Hodgins to me, but maybe there's some sort of middle ground, and that was Mrs. H.
You found it. She loved Mrs. H.
And now
My mom and dad are both big on the kind of like old school, call me Mr. or Mrs. Whereas your mom is definitely of the new school, like, I'm Barb.
Call me Bob.
That's a good impression. All right, I think we probably.
Yeah, good luck finding a way place to cut that bone.
Yeah, you dumb motherfuckers.
Whatever.
Oh, wait, sorry, that's misogynist. You fatherfuckers.
You should, do one of the hashtag things.
Yeah, you know what? I give up at this point trying to I don't do that.
You do a good job.
Well, if I'm doing a good job, I don't know if you guys are really checking or not.
No,
I'm like,
listen to
I pick
every
a spot
episode.
and I'm like, whatever, turn the music up, it's done. Like,
Yeah, well, it works though. That's all you need to do.
you guys
As soon
are
as it
so
comes up, it's good.
undisciplined because I'm like, just do a quick joke and say a punchline like a comedian does, and you're like, anyways, blah 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 blah
That's
blah
how
blah
it
blah,
goes
and I'm
with
like,
this.
all right, whatever, I give
It's
up.
non-scripted.
Hey, it's anarchy. I'm not gonna fight you guys. I
Yeah,
don't get to
don't
say
try to
what you guys
control
do,
me.
so it's all good. I'm just, But Mike, I was telling Crofton earlier, I tried a different overlay with the video. You should check it out and just tell me tomorrow when it goes live.
Yeah, I heard. I was there. I heard it.
Okay. And
I'll check.
so, did you lose too much on your end? Me and Crofton were okay, and everything you said came through fine. So.
Oh, well, then it's fine. Whatever.
But it's just you lose the flow of conversation.
No,
and
I think it
that's-
was. I think
you up.
whatever. I'm not too worried about it.
It
All
was
right,
just
live
funny.
stream. Thanks for checking us out. Take care.